So welcome back everyone for the third part in our Revit basics tutorial, where today we're going to get into working on materials, wall component, furniture, and if possible, we're going to dive into Revit families. So I want to say, if you haven't seen parts 1 or 2 yet, please go to the previous videos before you begin to watch this one. If you are, however, just interested in learning about wall component, material, furniture, and making families, then you're more than welcome to watch in this video. Otherwise, please watch the other videos first. So let's get into it. So once again, we're just going to open our project. You can either open it here where they're going to show you your most recent project, or go on file and browse for it. So we're going to start off by working on applying materials. This includes materials to the floor. This includes the walls, all these things, because right now what we're working with are generic materials, and I'm going to show you. So if we go on realistic, you can see that this is just a dark gray generic material. It's not anything in particular. So what we're going to do is, let's first switch this back to hidden line. We're going to begin working floor by floor. So let's start off with the ground floor. And by coming here, the first thing we want to do is begin to actually define what type of wall this is. So this is a generic wall at the moment. And if we go here to the scroll down, there's actually many types of walls that we can make. We can have a brick wall, or, etc., masonry wall. So what we're going to do, actually, instead of selecting one of these other wall types, we're going to go on edit type, and we're going to hit duplicate. Always hit duplicate, because you do not want to overwrite what's currently in the Revit program. So let's click exterior wall, and we're going to hit OK. And now we're going to go and hit edit under structure. This is the interesting part. So now we can begin to create a series of layers to make up the wall component. What we're going to do is, let's hit insert. Let's put a few of them, right? Well, we want to be at the very top. Let's say we want this building to be made out of, let's say we want it to be wood, a wooden paneled facade. So we're not gonna get into too much detail, but each of these layers can become a layer in a wall cavity. So you can have your first finish, right? Our first finish, this could be our last finish. Let's say this is the interior of our wall. Let's actually bring that down, and let's bring this one up. So this is going to be our first and second finish, right? And then this structure right here, we can have a thermal air, like as in the air barrier, and we're actually going to need a few more. So here we can have some sort of structure, whether it's CMU or the studs, the wooden studs that's holding up the building. Here we can also begin to add some membranes to our building. So let's actually swap this. Let's make this the membrane layer. Here will be, we'll actually make this the substrate layer. Here will be the membrane layer. And over here we want to have a thermal air layer. And let's also add, let's add this. Let's move it down. So we're gonna have our structure here. So now we're going to think of this as a basic wall cavity. So you have your exterior finish, which is what we have up here. Your exterior finish, you have your substrate, what's going to be connected to your finish. And then we want something like an air barrier, which is going to be very thin, and some type of membrane that's being wrapped continuously. The membrane actually can even be brought above. We can even bring that above the substrate layer. And then we're going to have our, oops, let's change this back to, let's change this back to thermal air. And then we have our structure, like our studs. And then you can have things such as your interior finish. In some cases, you have other components. We're just kind of looking at this as a very generic wall structure. So let's say our exterior finish is somewhere around 1/2 inch for our paneling. Let's make it that. Let's make our membrane. Our membrane is going to be so thin, like not even a 32nd, like a 64th of an inch. So thin. We can actually even leave our membrane to be 0 because it's just so minute. Our substrate layer, we want that to be about 1/2 inch, and we're gonna actually make this 3/4 of an inch now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more. 3/4 of an inch. We want a 1 inch air barrier. And our structure, let's think of like the basic wall studs. Let's think about maybe 2x6. So we can have our structure to be 6 inches. And then now we want our interior finish to probably be something roughly about 1/2 inch. These will be our wall components. Doesn't have to necessarily be too accurate. This is about understanding the components of a wall. This is not necessarily important in terms of having the correct R value, because first of all, in order to understand the R value, you need to know the location of your building. And then there's other calculations that go into play. So we're just focusing on how to create assembly component for your wall on Revit. And then we're going to go into how to change the material. And to change the material, what you're going to do is click the 3 dots here under the material category, and then now we can begin to change our material. This is our material browser, and for the most part, whether you're changing a wall assembly or for your floors or anything, this is what's going to pop up in terms of changing. So we can begin to search for the materials that we want. So let's type in wood, and it's going to show us all types of wood that we have available. So there's different components to the material browser. Here you can search for a specific material that could be in your project, or materials that can be in the Autodesk material library. And here we can actually create a material and duplicate material. Duplicating materials is important if you want to edit a material from the Autodesk library and create changes to the properties, just so you can avoid overriding the default materials that's in the Autodesk library, and you want to make sure you duplicate it. One thing we can do, for example, is let's say we want this to have a walnut finish. Even though walnut wood is very expensive, in order to import a material from your Autodesk material library to your project, all you have to do is click this upload button, or you have to drag and drop, whichever you prefer. So we're going to add it here. And now with this selected, we're going to go on this icon and click duplicate material. So we're going to right click this material, click rename, and we're going to name it to walnut exterior. You could pick any material you like for this example, just follow along and follow to understand the principles. So now with our walnut material selected, we're going to go on the identity tab, and here on the identity tab we can see the name of the product and description, things that talks about it, some comments you can add or keywords you can add for the material to kind of describe the texture. It could be something like the color, such as like burgundy. And you can begin to add other things. And when you're working in a firm, whether it's some type of material library or an architectural firm, usually what you would have to do is find a manufacturer that produces that type of wood, or like the type of size of the panels you want, and you will put the manufacturer information here, the model, the cost, and like information where you can learn more about it. But we're not going to worry too much about that, but I just wanted to show you where those things are. Now going to graphics, we can change how it appears when we render it. So we want to click use render appearance. We want it to look like this. And if we go here and go on texture alignment, we can begin to see how the texture actually kind of plays out. And this is really good if you have something like wooden panels that are vertical or horizontal. That way you can begin to rearrange it that way. And under appearance, we can begin to see how it looks. So we can change the color of the stain. We can make it something like a deeper red. Let me say closer to burgundy, or this shade of brown. Let's have it stained like that. and you can decide whether you want it to be glossy or not glossy, and you can even change the PNG if you'd like. So this is the default PNG that comes with the material, and you can go in and actually import your own PNG if you'd like. So I'm actually going to show you an example of this because I want my facade to be paneled. The way I'm going to change the JPEG is by clicking on this, and instead of using one of these textures that is available in the library, I'm going to go to a texture that I actually saved just for this project. And let's have this as our paneling. Boom. That looks really, really good. And you can even here begin to change the dimensions or the proportions of the paneling. I can imagine the size of each panel being maybe, or the widest panel being about 3 inches. So if this is about 3 inches, I can just begin to estimate that the whole thing might be something more like 18. So let's make this something more like 18 by 18. And then, are we going to repeat the tile? Yes, we want the tile to repeat, and you can just unlink the chain if you don't want it to be proportional, but I'll keep it proportional for the sake of this tutorial. And let's see, we don't want to invert anything. We can hit done. So now we have this pattern for our image. We want to check relief pattern to give some three-dimensionality to the texture just a bit. So let's make it, I think, about 2.02, or we could just do 2 flat out. Works really well. And here's where you can begin to tint the color if you want to just change the shade of it just a bit. And we're actually going to use this. We don't want this to be satin because this is just an exterior. If we go here, you can still see some keywords for the material. We actually want to change it from furniture to exterior. Make this bigger so we could take a closer look at it. And this is how it's going to begin to look. We want it to be maybe satin varnish rather than a glossy finish, since this is an exterior. And with all that, we could hit apply and then hit OK. And now we have our walnut exterior. And likewise, we can do the same for each of the layers. Here, for example, you would also technically want to add some insulation to this. And if you add your insulation, you can always add the material that applies for insulation, and that way you can finish it. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to worry about the exterior finish and the interior finish. So we're going to go here and let's determine the material for the inside. And we want something that's a bit like sheetrock. So this gypsum board will do quite fine. So let's select that. And looking at the graphics, so what we actually want to do is duplicate this material. Sheetrock wallboard, let's call it white. And what we're going to do is actually change a little bit of the texture and a little bit of the color. So we do want a little bit of reflectivity. We're gonna lower that a bit, however, make that 25. Here we're gonna make it about 30. Self-illumination, like imagine light hitting the wall and the wall is reflecting the light a little bit because it's a white color. So we definitely want that. Let's see the bump. That's fine, we can just leave it as that. Tint, maybe like a white tint we can add to it. Make it really, really white. And then we're gonna hit apply and then hit OK. So now we have the exterior material and the interior material determined. And if we go here and we click the preview button, we can begin to see a little bit of what that wall component is like. So that's the interior material. This is, for example, the studs, and that's the exterior material. And actually, let's even add the material to the studs just so we can begin to see that a little bit clearer. So we're gonna go on wood, and it could be something like a lumber wood. Lumber wood works quite well. So let's click a lumber wood, and we're not gonna modify it, but we're just gonna hit OK and apply it to the structure. So with all of that, just double check everything, and we can just hit OK, and this will be pretty good for our wall component. So because we were working with 8-inch generic wall, this is going to increase by 3/4 of an inch since it's 8 3/4 of an inch. And now what we want to do is select each of these walls. We want to select all the walls, and we want to filter out everything else that's not a wall. So all of these things, we want to filter it, hit OK, and now we want to click this drop down, and what we want to do is change it to exterior wall right here, the one that we just made. So give that a second to load, and now everything's updated. Everything is the exterior wall. And if we quickly go to our 3D view, it's just going to be the lower level that we're looking at right now. But if we go here and let's change the view to something like realistic, we can begin to see this. But now something's a little bit off. Why is our material on the inside reflected on the outside? It's really all about the way you draw your walls. So this happens quite a lot on Revit. Your interior is drawn on the outside instead of it being the other way around. So all we have to do is click on the wall, go on the floor plan, and then what we're going to do is unlock anything that's locked. We're going to click on the wall, flip it. Click on the wall, flip it. Click on the wall, flip it, and we're going to do this for each of the walls. Flip, flip it, flip, flip, flip the wall, and this is last but not least, flip the wall. And when we go back, now we can see that it's flipped the opposite way. And I don't quite like entirely how this looks. So let's go back to the materials, and I'm gonna change this just a little bit just to get like a better pattern. Let's go here, double click, width, we can just make it 24. And I'm going to keep it like this. Not really, actually. The problem with this image is that it's not seamless. So when you look at the pattern, you can see the seam. So let's try using another image and see if it works a little bit better. And actually, you know what? This works a little bit better. Not perfect, but it works a little bit better. But yes, you always want to try to work with a material that's as seamless as possible. So what we want to do now is we want to copy the material edits that we made on the first floor to the upper level. So now what we want to do, let's go to our elevation. So actually, let's go to floor plan, and we want to change each of these walls to being an exterior wall. So we go down here, let's make it exterior wall. And then likewise, we want to do this on the upper level as well. Let's go to our attic and gym story. So we're going to go here, select it, select, select, and select. And we select these last two walls, and we're going to change it to exterior wall as well. And now if we go to the 3D view, we also have the same issue. So let's just flip each of these walls. Much better. So now looking around, make sure everything is okay. We have one more here actually. So going back to 3D, perfect. And everything's flipped. Now likewise, we want to do the same thing for the floor. So there's many things you can do in terms of actually applying a material to the floor. So now returning to our floor plan, what we want to do is actually begin to apply materials to the ground as well. So what we're going to do is change this to shaded, and now select our ground component. And what we want to do is go on edit type, and we're going to make a duplicate likewise with the floor. And we're going to call this interior floor components and hit OK. And now what we're going to do for this layer is likewise, we're going to edit the structure, and we're going to add a few categories. So we have the finish, and the finish being like our finished floor, whether it's, you know, some sort of like wooden tile. So we're going to add the finish here. And next we're going to add structure. And the structure is going to compose of our floor joists. So that's going to be the structure layer. So we're going to keep our floor components very simple. So let's think of it as the finished floor structure. And after the finished floor structure, maybe something like a subfloor to actually hold this finished floor. So then we're going to add something like a subfloor. We're going to call it substrate. Next, we're going to have our structure, which is our floor joists. And then the last component that we're going to have is going to be our ceiling. So let's add that right there, and let's click finish number 2. But then in between it, we want like a small airspace for, you know, let's say you have wires and all these things running into the ceiling. So the measurement is not necessarily going to be accurate, but let's focus on just the components. So your finished floor could be anywhere between somewhere like a 1/2 inch. Of course, your floor joist is going to be a lot thicker than your studs. So floor joist could be anything such as 2x10 or maybe 2x12. Let's just focus on having something like a 2x10 for our structure here. So we're going to make it 10 inches. And here for the other substrate, let's make it something like 1/2 inch. Let's actually make this 1/2 inch, and let's change this to 1/4 inch. And then our air barrier, that's going to be something like, let's say 1 inch. That works just fine. And our finish layer is going to be, let's say somewhere like 3 or actually 1/2 inch as well. Let's begin to define the materials. So we want this, ideally I want this to be some type of wood. Something like this oak flooring seems pretty interesting. Let's go on appearance. Satin will work very nicely, and we can make a semi-glossy varnish. And we're not going to be doing too much to any of these things. We're going to use the render appearance here, and everything else seems just about right. So we could just hit OK. And we can have it here, and here in the preview, which you can activate the preview by clicking here, you can begin to see some of the components. So now for the structure, which is the floor joist, we want to just have something like, let's put in wood. We want something just like a soft lumber. Use render appearance, and we can just hit OK. And for our finished ceiling, we want it to be similar to the wall. We could be some type of sheetrock. It could be many things, but I'm going to keep it simple and make it just like a sheetrock. So we can use the same gypsum board that we use for the walls, and we can use it here. And let's just hit OK. And the airspace is not going to have any finish because it's just airspace. And then we can hit OK once we have this, and hit OK. And now we have our floor component. So let's switch this over to shaded, wire hidden frame actually. And now you're going to see it portrayed something like this. So if you don't want to see any of these lines for the floor pattern, all you have to do is click on the floor, go on edit type, and then under edit type, what you have to do is go on edit, and then you're going to go to the floor finish, click here, and then under the graphics, you go on, you double click here for the texture alignment, and all you have to do is from here, click no pattern. And then when you hit OK, OK, and OK, you're not gonna have any pattern. But for me, I do wanna see some type of pattern. So what I'm going to do is go back on edit type. Let's go back on the material for the floor and surface pattern. I want something a little bit wider. So let's go back to the horizontal, and what we want to do is actually duplicate it because we want to edit it. So we're going to call it horizontal wide. Let's change the spacing to something that's roughly, let's say 20 over 128. We're going to hit OK, hit OK. So we're going to have really thick floorboards just like that. And now what we want to do is apply the same type of floor to the upper levels. So let's click on the bedroom level, and we want to click here, and we want to apply the same floor type. Let's call it interior floor components. And actually there is a few things we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to go back and edit the floor because this is a bathroom floor. So we want to edit it so that the flooring is a little bit different, but we'll do that in just a second. Let's also add this to the attic. And here we have it, our floor components. Now going back here, and as well as the ground floor as well, where we're planning on putting our kitchen, we need to change the flooring types because kitchens and bathrooms technically have a different type of tile because those areas tend to be a little bit more humid because of the water that's available. You want to make sure you have a tiling in these areas, the kitchen and the bathroom. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit the floor type, and we're going to create a floor type just for the kitchen and just for the bathrooms. And we're also going to create a floor type for the terrace as well. But let's start off with the kitchen and the bathroom. So going to the ground floor. So your average mid-sized kitchen can measure anywhere between 100 square feet to 200 square feet. So that could be something, for example, like a 10 by 20 kitchen. And the way I'm thinking of doing it is making this kitchen a bit larger and extending it by adding a island somewhere where people can sit and have breakfast. So I'm ideally going to have my kitchen roughly around the dimensions of 30 feet running this direction and about 15 feet running in this direction. So let's draw it. So first things first, we're going to begin to edit the boundaries. So let's unpin this and we're going to click edit boundaries. So from here we want to go in, let's say about here, we want to go in 15 feet. Or let's, instead of 15 feet, maybe 10 feet will be more appropriate. Let's do something like 10 feet. We're going to have it like this. And now we're going to trim the floor. So we want to delete this part of the wall. And we can just drag this down here. So now we have this. So this is going to be our new wall boundaries for the tiled floor. And then here we're going to make a layout for the kitchen. First things first, I actually also want to specify a powder room on the first floor. That way you don't have to have guests coming up into your private area on the upper levels. So here would actually be a good location to add a powder room. Powder rooms are typically about 20 square feet. And we can enclose the wall over here. So we're going to have this basically line up with the edge of the staircase, this wall for the powder room. Let's shift it a little bit so it lines up with this edge. And here we have our powder room. And now for our powder room, let's just have the door swing something a lot smaller. So maybe something like this works pretty well for the powder room. And now let's continue to edit the boundaries. So with our powder room here, we also want to edit it this way. And now let's close it. And now what we're going to do, we're going to draw a new floor. Let's actually pick the same components here. We want the same components like the interior floor, but we're just going to change the material after. So we could just use the rectangle tool, draw it out like that, check, and here we have it. And likewise, we could do the same thing, click floor, use the rectangle tool, and draw it out this way. And then hit check when you're finished. But then now what we're going to do is go on edit type, and we're going to duplicate, and we're going to call it interior kitchen floor components. So we're going to go and edit structure, and we're going to change the first one from the oak wood flooring. And what we're going to do instead, we're going to create a new material, and let's rename this to kitchen floor tile. And now we're going to click on kitchen floor tile. We're going to go on the graphics. We want to use render appearance, and we're going to change this in just a moment. So for the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to put kitchen tiles and some classes. We could call it mosaic polished. And we can just keep it simple like that. And then let's go to appearance, and we're gonna name it kitchen tiles. And it's a polished semi-glossed gloss tiled mosaic. And we're just going to keep the description simple, just like that. So keyword tiles kitchen. So let's add an image, which we're going to use this image. Now we want to change the reflectivity. We do want it to be reflective, maybe not too much, maybe something like a 20. We don't want it to be hyper reflective, but something like a 20 looks pretty good. Self-illumination, just a bit. Dim glow sounds pretty good. And bump, we just want the texture to be just like that, to follow that. And we're gonna reduce that. We don't want it to be too much of a bump, so maybe about 10. And now we want to begin to just look cutouts. No, we don't have to worry about these two. We're not going to worry about tint. Glossiness, we can actually bring up just a bit. We want it to be maybe around 65 for the glossiness. That actually might be too much too. Let's do 60 for the glossiness. And now let's hit OK. OK. And OK. And we have our material. But let's actually create a pattern, a hatch pattern, so it could be easier to identify this. So kitchen floor tile. Let's see, we're going to click here. We're going to go on surface pattern, and we want it to be something like the crosshatch, but let's go on duplicate. Let's call it kitchen tile large, because we want to make the spacing just a bit bigger. And we're going to go on 18 by 18 because we want this to be a square. Hit OK. Okay, and here we have it. And typically you'll do the same thing. You'll find a material for the bathroom floor tile and apply it this way. But just for the sake of moving this tutorial along, we're just going to use the kitchen component for the bathroom as well. But normally you wouldn't do this, of course. So now that we did this, we're going to repeat the same process that we did on this level on each of the levels where we do have a different flooring condition. And we're also going to do the same thing also for the terrace as well. So I'm going to skip forward in this video and I'm going to do that and show you the end results. So just to repeat, likewise, what we're going to do here, we're going to make a custom floor for the roof. So we're going to select that and we're going to go on edit type. And then we're going to go on duplicate and we're going to call this terrace roof or terrace deck / roof. And now we're going to go on edit structure and we're going to do the same thing. The only thing that's really going to change between this layer and the other types of floor that we made is that this needs insulation because it's also insulating you from the outside because it's also a roof. And also we need to change the material to something that's not like an indoor flooring, but something more appropriate like an outdoor decking. I'm also going to skip forward in this part, but it's the same principles. We're going to click insert to add the appropriate layers, and then we're going to change what the function of these layers are. Structural deck is what we're going to have, and then we're going to change the materials and create the appropriate materials we need to apply these things. So I'm going to skip forward right now. Crashed again. This is going to happen a lot. Make sure you save constantly. There's a small glitch that happened when I was creating my floor, and if you have a glitch like this, all you have to do is click on the wall, click attach base to top, select where you want to attach it, and you can do it just like that. So let's attach these first. One more thing we have to fix here, the roof is basically inverted, so we need to flip the roof similar to how we flipped everything else. I actually managed to fix the issue with the materials for the roof decking. The problem was actually with the JPEGs that I use for the custom material. I just had to switch that around and now it's working. What might happen to you for you is if you see that the roof decking is blank, what you really have to do is try and get the surface flipped, similarly to how you would flip the surface on the wall. And just another quick and faster way to flip the surfaces of the wall, if you don't want to hit the toggle button, is just to select the wall, hit spacebar, and it will flip. And I could just flip it back by hitting spacebar again. The next area we want to just add materials to is the roof as well. So we're going to go on the generic roof. Let's go on edit type. And similarly, we want to hit duplicate because we want to create a composite for our roofs as well. So we're going to call this roof composite 1. So from here we click on edit, and now we're going to likewise edit the layers of the roof. So when looking at the structure of a roof, you have your 2x12 rafters, which will amount to being 1 foot. The other thing we want to add is shingles, or let's say tiles, which could be anywhere between 7/16 of an inch. But what we'll do for this tutorial, we'll round it to about 1/2 inch. And we could just call this finish number 1. You're always going to have something like a thermal membrane or water membrane, we can call it. And of course, underneath our finish, we want to have some sort of substrate. So we're going to add another layer for our substrate. And our substrate could be roughly 3/4 of an inch. And of course, you want to have an insulation layer. So what we're going to do is add another layer, and let's call this thermal layer. And our insulation, we want it to be, well, the thing is when determining insulation, it really depends on the total R value that's required from the area of where you're making your building. For now, let's just pick anything just for the sake of just understanding how to put these layers together. Let's do something like that's around 8 inches for insulation. And then we want some sort of airspace, which can be somewhere around, and we'll change it to thermal air. We could just have a 1 inch airspace. So now let's begin to arrange this. So we're going to bring the finished layer upwards above core boundary, and we're going to have these two wrapped together. And then these layers are what's going to be underneath here, and then the airspace is what's going to go a little bit lower. We're going to have it underneath the structure here. And then our last layer that we're going to add will be our finish layer. So we're going to call this finish number 2. And let's drop this a little bit lower. And then this could be anything, let's say between 1/2 inch and 1 inch. Once again, we're going to begin to define the materials for each of these layers. You just click here in order to define the material. And then you can either search up a material, for example, shingles, and you're going to get asphalt shingles, or you can create a material, and by creating a material, you can go here. Let's rename it roof shingles. And once you have that created, all you have to do is go on the graphics tab, click render appearance, and then click here to add your desired JPEG for the roof shingles. And that should be all you have to do. And then you hit apply, then you hit OK, and then you can just go out of that. But for me, I'm just going to leave it as a default roof shingle material. Let's go with this. This looks pretty good. Yes, let's go with this wood shake. I'm going to use render appearance. And everything default seems pretty good, so we're going to apply that there. Finish layer. We're just going to have the same type of ceiling. Let's have the gypsum board white material. We're going to have that there, and then we're just going to define our structure to be some sort of softwood. Insulation material. We could use a rigid insulation, and we could leave it that color, that's fine. Let's just go on use render appearance. And this is about everything. So let's hit OK and OK. And here we have it. Now that we added all of our materials to the floor plan, the next thing that we want to do is to begin to furnish the floor plan. And we're going to see how far we can get working with families. So what we're going to do now is go to our floor plan. Let's go to ground floor. And we'll start here and work our way up. So when you want to import a furniture into Revit, there are two ways you can do it. You can do it either by doing a place component or by modeling it in place. Let's start off with place component. So when you go on place component, you'll see this properties. In the properties tab over here, you'll see a series of different types of furniture that pops up, even trees, things that you can use on the outside. But if you don't see any of these things in this category, what you have to do is go to the insert tab, and from insert you want to click load family. So in the load family tab, you're going to have a variety of categories of different things you can import into the project. So what we want to do is import some furniture. So we're going to click furniture, and we can start with literally anything. I want to import like a few beds, seating, tables. So let's just start off with tables. And if we click here, you can get a preview of what the furniture looks like. So you're more than welcome to add anything that furnishes your plan the best. For me, I'm probably going to add maybe a desk for the bedroom. I want to import a desk. I want to import this coffee table, maybe the dining table as well. So we're going to start to import a few of these things. You can just also highlight everything and hit open in order to import everything. So let's do that. Give it a moment. So all you're going to do is overwrite existing. Do not overwrite existing with its parameters. If, for example, you already imported the material and you made edits to it, you don't want to overwrite that, so just overwrite the existing. So now when you click on architecture and you click on component, place component, now you'll see a lot more options available to you. You're going to see the different proportions available for the object. And what's very nice is that similarly to how we edited the wall composite, we can actually edit the furnitures as well. So I'm going to demonstrate and show you an example. Let's say I want to add this 30-inch by 84 by 22 dining table. So I click on the dining table, and all I have to do is click edit type. So from the edit type menu, remember you always want to duplicate. You do not want to overwrite what's already in the Revit system. So hit duplicate, and what we can do is we could change the dimensions. Let's call this 36. Let's make this 88, and let's make the height for this, let's say 24. And we're going to get rid of that, hit OK. So now after we do this, we're going to alter the dimensions here. So we want this to be 24 inches, we want this to be 88 inches, and we want this to be 34 inches. So let's hit OK, and we're going to alter it. So here, let's put in 24 inches. Here, we're going to put in 88 inches. 1 second, sorry about that, 88 inches. And here, we're going to put we're going to put 34 inches. And then all you have to do is hit OK for your duplicate. And now if we go to the drop down, now we can see the new type of dining table that we created available here. So you always have access to alter the dimensions. If you need something to be bigger or smaller, just go on, click on the object, then hit duplicate. And after you hit duplicate, you want to alter the dimensions in the name and go to the settings and alter the dimensions that way. So we could click here. Let's take our dining table. We could hit spacebar to rotate it. Our dining table can go somewhere, let's say somewhere here. And likewise, you want to follow a similar procedure for every object that you import. So what you want to do to furnish your floor plans, Once again, let's go back to the Insert tab and go on Load Family. So from Load Family, there are many different things you can import. You can import different types of doors. As I mentioned earlier, we want to go back and change some of these doors and windows because certain doors for exterior, you do not want to have the same doors in your interior. So we want to go and import different types of doors and different types of furniture systems. For now, what you should do is import different types of tables, storage units, seating, and beds. And if you want to have mirrors and TVs, that's completely up to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward into this video, and I'm going to import each of these items from the furniture category, and I'm going to arrange and furnish each of the floor plans. And then once I finish, we can go over how I arrange some of these things, and you can sort of compare what you've done to what I'll have on my screen. So take a moment, you can pause this video and begin to furnish your floor plan, and then afterwards, when you finish, unpause it, and then we're gonna try to see how we can get into making your own custom furniture using model in place and families. So I'm going to fast forward right now. So I just finished furnishing each of the levels. Let's quickly go through some of the things that I've done. So the bathrooms, you have your tubs, your fixed showers, your sinks, the vanity, toilet, beds, chairs, desks, dressers, the closet with the bifolding doors. Of course, the attic, you have the gym equipment, the outdoor furniture for the terraces, washers, and of course, going back to the ground level, you have some basic layout for a living space, a gathering space, maybe a small little desk in the corner, lamps, TV, all that stuff. And I'm sure each and every one of your layouts look way more sophisticated than mine, but the point of this tutorial, these tutorials, is to really help you understand the tools in Revit and the processes you would follow working on a project rather than focusing so much on the design. So there is just a few things I want to say. First is that some of these Revit families I had to download, such as this lamp. Actually, this is something I made, but some of these other furniture, such as the sofa, and you have a few other things such as these chairs, is things that I had to download on the internet. If you type in Revit family and type in what you're looking for, you will be able to find a lot of interesting things, and all you have to do is hit insert, load family, and you'll be able to bring that family into your project. Things such as plumbing fixtures, once again, you have to just go on load family, and what that would be under is plumbing, and you go on architectural, and then you go on fixtures, and then you should be able to find it in one of these folders. And likewise, that's just the same process you're going to have for each and every furniture and fixture that you add to your floor plans. Another thing I want to point out is that certain fixtures, for example, this fixed rectangular bathtub, can only be added to a floor plan with a host. What do I mean by that? Let me show you. So if I try to go on component, let's not save right now, and let's switch this to the rectangular tub right here. If I don't host it to a wall, I won't be able to place it anywhere. Only if there's a wall available as a host, I'll be able to place it. And you're going to have a few components like that where you need a host in order to place it. For example, doors and windows, if there isn't a wall as a host, you will not be able to place it anywhere in your project. With that out of the way, I wanted to go back to the ground level. For the most part, everything's furnished except really the kitchen, and I left this undone on purpose because I want to go through the process of modeling a kitchen. Because for the most part, when you try to look for a Revit family for a kitchen online, it's not really easy to find one, or the options of what you see is not too great. Let me show you something I've done in a previous project. So this is a previous project I worked on, and now we're just going to zoom into this area. Looking here, so this kitchen here, I basically modeled each of the countertops and the cabinets that are above and below. I modeled each of those things, and I'm going to quickly show you how that looked in terms of a rendering. So going here to a kitchen rendering, that's a little bit how it came out. So I want to go over just the process of actually modeling something in place, because sometimes you might not find the correct fixture that closely matches what you're trying to show in your project. So let's go over model in place. So I'm going to close this and let's go back to the ground floor. To model something in place, we go on component. Instead of place component, we're going to click model in place. And now you just need to write out the category of what exactly you're trying to model. So what we want to model, the closest thing would be a kitchen fixture. So what we will do, so we can categorize it as either a generic model or furniture system if you want to get very specific, but for now we're just going to leave it as a generic model. So we're going to call this countertop 1. So we're going to first work on the island, and then we're going to work on the cabinets and then the countertop. So let's name this, let's actually start with the countertop. So let's call this countertop 1. So once you input the name of the object that you want to create, you're going to see that the ribbon for the Revit ribbon has changed above, and instead you have a create tab, insert, and the following. So here you see something called extrusion, which those of you are familiar with programs such as Rhino 3D, you know that to extrude an object is taking a 2D outline of any object and creating a 3-dimensional planar surface out of that object. So there are various operations we can follow in order to model. We do want to do something that is going to be an extrusion. So what we want to start off by doing is drawing the shape of the counter. So because this tutorial is just mainly focused on the principles of how you can begin to model these things, we're not going to focus too much on really what the dimension of our kitchen is, though in reality, when you're practicing in the firm, understanding your work triangle in the kitchen is very crucial. So making sure every leg of the work triangle is no less than 4 feet, but at the same time is all 3 sides, the sum of the triangle adds up between 13 and 26 feet is very important when you're working in a firm, and you have to follow those rules. But once again, for the sake of this tutorial, it's all about just learning the process of doing these operations in Revit. So we're just going to draw a countertop on this side and then draw one on this side between the refrigerator and the sink. So let's do that right now. So what we can do is even use the rectangular tool rather than having to draw it out completely. Let's have it. All right, so let's go here. Let's actually make it 8 feet. We want this line to match this. Let's make it flush. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. So first things first, we're working on the countertop itself before we do the cabinets beneath it. So that's good. So we have both countertops here. And what we're going to do, now that we have it drawn out, we're going to direct our attention to the column on the left hand side. So here it says extrusion end and extrusion start. What this means basically is, where do you want your extrusion to begin? Do you want it to begin 0, 0 on the floor? And the extrusion end is how high it's going to go. So because we want the extrusion to be the thickness of the counter thicknesses could range anywhere between 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches. So if we make our thickness 1 inch, the extrusion end point would be 2 feet 11 inches. So let's hit the check. So what tends to happen is, while you're modeling in place, if you model 2 objects together and do it like that, what's going to happen is that Revit is going to group them together. So just be mindful about that. What we want to do is actually extend this about 1 inch, because the countertops tend to have a nose, a little lip that hangs over the cabinets beneath. So we don't have to make it like super accurate, but let's extend this about 1 inch. Let's do about the same amount here. So the last thing we want to do for the countertops itself is add a material. So by going on material and finishes, we want to go on, let's say, a marble material. Doesn't really matter. We'll just use anything for now. But of course, you can always create your own material or import your own custom Revit material into this program. So we're just going to use render appearance, hit OK. And now this material is applied to this surface, hit finish model. And now that material is applied here. And now we're going to continue modeling. Let's go on architecture tab, component, model in place. And we're just going to leave it as a generic model once again. And we're going to call this below counter. Below counter. So now we're just going to begin with another extrusion. And let's make sure our rectangle tool is selected because this is just going to be rectilinear. And we're going to do it like that. But remember, we want to have a slight offset. So let's offset this inwards. This is 8 feet. We want to do it 7 feet, 11 inches. Offset it like that. And this is just fine as it is. So now that we have these two things outlined, what we're going to do is follow the same process. Because this is the cabinets under the counter itself, we do want it to be 0. So we do want it to start on the ground. And we do want the height to be below the counter itself. So we picked 34 inches last time, so we're going to have 2 feet 10 inches this time around. So let's hit the check. And we're going to add a material to it. Let's put something like, do we have mahogany? We have a mahogany, so let's just use that. Well, actually mahogany, let's pick a different wood. Maybe a dark wood. Maybe something that's a little darker. Or actually this looks pretty good. So we're going to apply it and then hit finish model. And now if we go here, so now we have the countertops and the counter. The next thing we're going to do before we make any doors, we're going to make the hanging cabinets. So we're going to go back to our ground floor plan. And then from here, what we're going to do is go on architecture, component, and we're going to go on model in place. And this, we could put it under casework because cabinets are caseworks. So we're going to call it cabinets. And let's call it cabinets 1 because we're probably going to make multiple. So once again, we're going to do extrusion. And cabinets, first of all, cabinets from the countertop tends to be 18 inches off the top of the counter. And within that 18 inches, that's where you have your backwash. And cabinets themselves could be about 28 inches tall, and the depth could be anywhere between about 12 inches to 18 inches. So let's just make our cabinet maybe 16 inches. So we could just use the rectangle tool and we could edit the dimensions afterwards. So let's have that. And what we're going to do, we're going to change the, let's change the depth to 1 feet 4 inches. And likewise, we're going to have the same thing on this side too. So this lines up perfect. We're going to have this on this side. And for extrusion start and end, remember the last extrusion for the countertop ended at 2 feet 11 inches. So we want to add 18 inches to that because that's how tall the backwashes tend to be in most kitchens. If we add 18 inches to 2 feet 11 inches, what we're going to have as the extrusion start is 4 feet 7 inches. So let's change that right now to 4 feet 7 inches. And if we add the appropriate height to that, which is 28 inches, or in other words, 2 feet 4 inches to this, we're going to end up with a total value of 6 feet 11 inches. So now with our numbers in place, we can hit check to create it. Change the material. Let's pick the same material that we picked for the cabinets below. And then we hit finish model. And if we go back to our 3D view, we can see in this wireframe mess that the cabinets is hanging up here. Yeah, take a look at it. Let's go back to the floor plan. And that's how you begin to model things in place in Revit. So I'm going to speed this up and actually follow the same processes to create an island counter. And feel free to do the same as well. Now we finished our layout for our floor plan. So this is where I'm going to wrap up this tutorial. We went over many things, such as working with wall components, adding materials to your object, adding furniture, and really understanding what a Revit family is. So Revit families is such a complex topic that I actually want to do a separate video from this 6-part series to actually go into understanding Revit families. And I will teach you how to create your own custom Revit families, such as creating these corner windows for your project, which normally isn't available within Revit, but is something that you would have to make. And if you're lucky enough, you can find something online that you can download. Once again, make sure you save your work. Stay tuned for the next part where we're going to start going over doing room tags, schedules, callouts, and things of that nature. If any of you have any sort of questions, please let me know in the comments below. I'll make sure to get to each and every one of you, and I'll hope to see you all in the next part.